You ready to film another exciting episode? Real good at doing stuff?
I can't wait.
Gotta be more exciting for Tuesday.
I can't wait.
Okay, good. There we go. Alright, I'm here with Cleetus. We're going to tune this hot rod up today, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
We're going to start with a little full test, just see where we're at.
Yeah. You know we got a rule.
What's that?
Always test a two-step.
Exactly.
Every race day,
just for fun, if nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. We always test.
Alright, are you guys ready for some real good stuff doing? I know I am. Alright, so today's video, we're going to kind of go back. When I first started this channel, I did a few videos about tuning and whatnot, and we'll do some more down the road, but this is a particular tuning session that has drawn some interest, so we'll talk about it a little bit. This past week or so, I was contacted about tuning Cleetus Mcfarland, his El Camino drag week car. You might have heard of this guy. He's got a humongous YouTube channel. A lot of you guys are probably watching it from coming over from there, which is great. You know, my channel is more kind of a tech-oriented thing, just all kinds of stuff, and you never know what you're going to see on here. But anyhow, I was contacted to help tune Cleetus's car for the weekend for the FL2K race, and help with that. And one of the things I was also going to be helping out, he's just recently put a Profiler traction control system on there, Profiler EFI, that works with his Holly. And I was also going to be helping getting that dude up and running, getting it sorted out a little bit. So anyhow, in this video today, we're going to talk about some of how this all went down, the improvements that were made over the course of 3 or 4 days, and to start off, we're going to look at how things started off. I actually drove down there and was in person on Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday. Yeah, at Gainesville. Which whenever I have the option, I always like to work in person at the racetrack, because you're going to see things that you don't see. You're hired as a professional to look to with some kind of drag racing expertise. And a lot of times, you're going to see things that maybe others don't notice. And if you're not there, you can miss out on a lot. So whenever possible, I like to work in person, and that's the better way to do things. Now, for the actual race, I had prior obligations, and I couldn't be there, unfortunately. So I had to work remotely, and we were sending back and forth data, logs, and tunes, and working that way, which works, but it's always better to do it in person. And that was probably especially important in this case. So when I got there, I'm really not familiar with the car at all that much, and one of the things, the first things we got to learn about the car a little bit, and that's where it helps to be there and see. The first thing that you notice on this car is it's an El Camino, and it has why that's important is it has a 118-inch wheelbase, right? Or that's what they're telling me the wheelbase of the car is. And on top of that all, it's 3,550 pounds. It's very heavy, super heavy. This thing is a legit street car, so it's just a heavy car. And they've just put it on a 275 for this race. Now, from what I understand, when they're running most of the drag and drive stuff, they run a 315. So that's a big change. That changes a lot of things. It changes the ride height in the rear. But the biggest thing is you're putting, hopefully the same amount of power or more down on a shorter tire with that won't take as much. That matters a lot in this case because we got a very long wheelbase and we got high mounted turbos up front. There's a lot of things that affect this, and that's so immediately in my mind I'm like, okay, well we got to be smart here because we can't just go hammering this thing. So that's one of the benefits of being there. If I hadn't have been there, I might not have really clued into all that. Anyhow, so the first thing we do, I kind of look through the tune-up, and right off the bat, I see things that I want to change, and some of them we change right away, and some of them we don't. The one thing we changed right away, when I first got there, the target dome on the starting line, launch dome pressure is, if I remember right, was 16. Okay, well, I'm thinking, well, this cannot be right. That's maybe how they're running it, but I'm very concerned about that because that sounds way higher than it needs to be, especially if they got a really light spring. There's no situation where a big block, generally speaking, on a little tire radial racing is going to need to leave with 16 on the gate, generally speaking, So my suspicion is, all right, well, we don't really need that much dome. We can do the same thing and cut that way, way back. And we do. We play around. We spool a few times and get that down. I think we end up starting off at about 7 pounds, right? Now, the reason that matters is if you have an excess of dome, either in the launch or shortly after or whatever, you're not going to be consistent when the atmosphere changes, right? You may have it kind of where it's hanging out and doing the same thing every pass for a little bit. But when you're getting some good air or something, guess what? That's all out the window, and all of a sudden you're going to have a few more pounds of pressure, and you're going to be wondering why. And that's because you never really had control of the dome in the first, or of your launch pressure in the first place. So we cut that back to get rid of some of that, so we get more under control. The other thing that I'm really concerned about is the fueling strategy. So immediately I want to put a lot of fuel in it. And we do this, but I don't do it first pass because I'm trying to change the minimum amount. I want to just kind of send this thing down as close as I can to the way they've been running it so I kind of got a starting point so I can see, all right, well, this is where they've been, right? Yeah, maybe this isn't the smartest idea. You could argue it should go ahead and change the fuel, but supposedly they've been running this way, so we make the first hit with the fuel more or less the way it is. The second hit, we change the fuel. And immediately that gets us into trouble. Early on Wednesday, we had this problem pretty quick. And that is, if you look right here, this purple line. What is all this mess? All right. All right. The purple line is the fuel pump, fuel pressure. And once we get the boost comes up right here, once we get up in the stink a little bit, it tanks. It's done. The pump drops. We go from where are we at? 121 pounds to 81 pounds. And if you look at correction, all of a sudden it takes off, adding a ton of positive correction. All right, well, this is bad for business. What happens is you can run it that way and it may keep up, but it's just not good. You're not atomizing the fuel the way it needs to be. And the reason being, technically, is the delta, fuel pressure delta, is too low. You want a big difference between your boost pressure and your fuel pressure so that the fuel is atomized correctly. If you have 40 pounds of boost and 40 pounds of fuel pressure, how much fuel is going in your motor? Not much. Now, if you have 40 pounds and 40 pounds of boost and 80 pounds of fuel pressure. Now you have a 40-pound delta. That's what that means. Generally 40 is not enough, but we're nowhere near right. It's making it up with injector compensation, but that's not how that's not good. And the other thing is, out here we're running out of gear because I think they changed to the 275 from the 315, and I think they left the same gear in it, and we're running quarter mile, so it's just out of gear, right? So for the remainder of that day, we play around with this and play around with that. But we're up against that. So we kind of shortened, I think we maybe shortened some of the passes up to 8th mile. And, we were just kind of struggling with that. Our hands were tied, kind of. Now, if you look at the profiler, early on, we get it going, get it on. And then just to show you some of what I use the profiler for sometimes. In this case, we're trying to go faster and faster, so we want the profile kind of above and out of the way. So it's not hindering us. But you can still see, let me turn some of this off, right here and right here, these are the shift points, right? And almost always, a lot of times when the car shifts, it'll slip the tire just a little, real quick. And some guys will use gear retard to manage this and keep things under control. Or they have different strategies, right? But a lot of times I'll let the profiler do it because it kind of does it automatically. Especially once you're really starting to tighten the profile down on your drive shaft. But even when it's way above like this, as soon as it gets here, this thing rips out 7 degrees and then shoves it right back in. And down here, rips out 4.5 degrees, shoves it right back in. And this happens really quick. A lot of times you'll never even know what's happening, So that's an excellent method of managing that, in my opinion. Like I say, and the more you pull that profile down on the drive shaft, as you get more and more passes and get more confident in where your profile needs to be, the better that works. All right, so day one, I think we went I don't even remember, low 7s or something, playing around and run into these problems and kind of had to stop. We're up against that until we made those changes. So what happened from there is Cleetus, Garrett and his crew went back to the shop and swapped out the fuel pump, put a bigger pump on it, and changed out the rear gear to give us more room up top in preparation for the FL2K race. And that was the only major changes we had to make. But anyhow, that made a big difference. And then now we'll switch over to that and look at some of the changes made throughout the course of the weekend. All right, so back to the weekend. In qualifying, we make a few rips. Pretty quick, we get a personal best, which is a 693. It was a 699, so we've made improvements. Now it's qualifying time. We got to try to pick up the pace because the way I understand it, at this point, he's racing cars running, 680s and 70s, so we've got to go a little quicker. So we make progress. I send him a tune that is, what is it? Open global file. Whoa. It is Big Spicy right here. Big Spicy. All right, now if you look at boost versus time, we've started to creep this up a little bit, get it in a little quicker. And we're up to 43 pounds of dome out the back. So we're running more power out the back. Like I said, we made the fuel change earlier, and I feel like if we didn't do that, we're going to burn this thing to the ground. So that those are the changes so far as fueling. We've changed the shift from on the 1.2. We brought that down to 6,500 on the 1.2, left it at 8,000 on 2.3. The reason we do that is that sometimes that will make it less likely to knock the tire off when on the 1.2, right? Now this can go both ways, right? Because the other variable here is track position. The reason it can help here is because it makes the converter softer, right? The more you turn it, the harder that converter gets. The slippage is less and less and less, and when you shift, it shocks that tire more and more, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Like I say, the variable here is track position. If your track position farther down track looks a lot better, you may want to raise it, So this can kind of go both ways, but in this case, for now, we're running it down. Another thing, I saw some criticism online, especially early on, of the 60 foots of this car, right? Well, from my perspective, you got to pick your battles, and you got to pick up the low-hanging fruit before you go swinging for the fences in the 60 foot. Why on earth would you want to do that? You've got a heavy car with tons of power that you're not even hardly using. Don't risk losing passes pushing the 60, starting off. Later on when you need to, creep it up there. But don't do it until you have to. You got power. You can just roll on from them. So that's what we're doing, until we need to. Now, later on race day, we're going to move this back up, and we're going to do all kinds of things. Now, if you look at, let's look at the difference between, Big Spicy, I think, got us like a 682 or so at 213. So it was a big change, and it went considerably faster. Now, if you look at the difference between, actually, first, let's look at some data here. Some issues we got when we run Big Spicy. All right, if you look at the starting line, it looks terrible. We're barely on the chip. We're not really getting up to the chip right. And the reason for this, I'm pulling more and more timing, trying to get boost in this thing, right? You can get boost in something several different ways, but a lot of times we'll pull a good bit of timing to help with that process. In this case, because this converter's kind of tight down low and we got tons of pressure here, we got only one dump on the back side of this thing, right? And I don't want to play with that because I don't want it to change the way we're hitting the tire yet. At some point, I may talk to Garrett and see about putting my system. I have a system for managing this that's much more complicated, and it does a lot more. That would give us more options. But right now, I've only got one, and I kind of don't want to change it because I'm afraid I'm going to knock the tire off. So the pressure is high here on the two-step, and that makes it hard to get to the chip, right? So normally I'll pull a lot more time than this, but just because of the situation, that's kind of out the window. It's not going to happen. Another thing that we got going on is down track. This thing is losing boost and then putting it back in. And the reason being is something is going on with his decreased solenoid. We still need to get to the bottom of that. This thing all through here, the decreased solenoid is 100% open, but it's not dumping anything hardly, or very slowly. It's like it's just not working right. And that's something we fought all weekend. Kind of is what it is. We need to probably just put solenoids on this thing or something and see if we can solve that problem. What else are we going to talk about? That's pretty much it. Now let's look at the difference in Big Spicy and Big Spicy 5. So at the end of that day, they had just a 4-car shootout, just for the heck of it, I think. And we needed to throw some stuff at it to try to do good in that race, and we did. So the main thing was, if you look at our boost map here, Big Spicy 5 is in considerably earlier, just a tick more, 2 pounds, nothing hardly. But we're got more here all the way, and then we're in a little earlier, right? And those are the main differences. There's some, none of the other stuff is really changing much. I might have changed the launch a little bit, but all that added up to a 666, I believe, right? Which was, once again, yet another personal best. All right, so that was that for qualifying. The next day, we have to race slower cars for the first several rounds. So we kind of back the thing off and just cruise, right? But once again, as always is the case, later on in the day, we've got to race the quick stuff. So we got to pick it up again. Now, first, I'll tell you what. Let me load Big Spicy 5. And then compare to the Ultimate Tune-Up. Wow. The Ultimate Tune-Up. All right, so if you look at boost, let's see, look, where are we at here? Okay, I moved his safeties out of the way because we knew we were going to be getting with it. We're kind of up against a couple things. His map sensor is only going to go to about 40 pounds of boost or so. Now, generally what that means is you can push it a little past it and just flatline that thing, and the O2 sensor will ride on it and still run it, you know. But you don't want to push it crazy past it. That can be all kinds of trouble, you know. But so we got a little room, I got the okay to get with it. Now, for whatever reason, they only want about that much in this motor anyhow. I don't know a whole lot of specifics on the engine itself, right? But I kind of know where our limits are at. So we push it up against that pretty hard. You can see here we've got 50 out back now, and that's going to net us. That's going to flatline the thing. My bet is that's probably 42 pounds of boost, something like that. And we're getting in quicker down here as well, you know, just bringing it in quicker. Now, eventually, another thing I did is I turned the lockup on. I brought it down just a few mile an hour, not much. And lockups, you know, a lot of the racing that we get to do, the lockup isn't an option because of rules or whatever. But in this case, it is an option. Now, I will say that lockups, sometimes they're not exactly what people think. It's just like warp drive or something, and it's, you know, it's not really like, it doesn't show up on the time slip quite like that. But, you know, it can be beneficial for sure. It just gets rid of that slippage and allows you to roll one out. So I brought that down just a little bit. What am I doing here? I moved rev limiters out of the way just to make sure we weren't going to get on them. I moved the two-step one more time. Fueling strategy pretty much the same. All right, time's out. I forgot something that's pretty important. It's kind of hard to keep track of all this stuff. It's been a few days and a million passes, and I'm trying to get it all right in my head. But there's a big thing that I didn't discuss earlier, and that is the let me move this out of the way. So beforehand, these guys were using a lot of launch retard, right? They're in your basic inputs and outputs. Time retard, let's look at it in graph form. Whoa, that is not the one I want to watch. Okay, so let me open another one. Yep, same place. Time retard, view graph. All right, so this is what was basically in there to start with. 15 immediately at trans brake release, up to 18, and not down to 0 until we got timing pulled out until 2.66 into the run, right? They're doing that to manage power, but I can't stress enough how I'm not a fan of that. It's very inconsistent, right? Don't get me wrong. There are times when I do use that or use timing to run turbo cars. But what this does, you know, what do you do when you want to spool a turbo? You're a bunch of timing out. All right, well, as the air gets better and better, this can, you know, your timing change that you make is exact every time. But what it can do is really piss your turbo off and you'll gain more from that. So all of a sudden you're like, well, why is my retard not working anymore? It's because, well, now you got 5 more pounds of boost because the air came around. You really got to be careful in that department. So throughout the course of the weekend, we're getting rid of that slowly but surely. And for 2 reasons. One, to make it more consistent, but also that's one of the methods that I'm using to add power, right? We need to pick up our 60. We're making these boost changes, both in launch boost and boost versus time, But we're also, about every pass I'm pulling more retard out, right? So if you look here in the, this is basically the first pass off the trailer versus the last pass, the 654. First pass, we're pulling all kinds of timing out, and it's forever before it comes back in. And then the quicker pass, we're hardly pulling anything out right here. That's it right there, that little spot. And then it's back in. And a few more passes, and that's probably going to be completely gone. Once we get a handle on things. But anyhow, I wanted to stick that in the video because it's a pretty important part of what was happening this weekend. Like I said, every pass, more and more of that was getting reduced. At one point, on a high 59 pass, or maybe a low 60 pass. I think he went a 61 at one point. And Cleetus says that it got into just a little bit of a wheelie. So I kind of look at a few things there and ask him some questions about where his shocks and limiters and such are at, right? And I'd have him make a change on both of those before the finals, and as well. So, sometimes that's one of those things that really helps to be in person. It's kind of hard to do from 1,000 miles away, but you can, So we made those changes as well. So it wasn't just all laptop. Sometimes there's some other things going on too. But anyhow, all that netted a 654 at 221. So all in all, through the weekend, picked up 4.5 tenths, which is pretty stout, and that won in both classes. The 28 Extreme class, and then whatever they called the streetcar class. And I think actually he had to race the same car in both finals, so they just combined it into one race and called it a day. And that was that. But anyhow, that's kind of a quick overlook about tuning Garrett's El Camino, the mullet, and I think we're going to do some more stuff here in the future. There's talk about going to the World Cup finals or whatever. That's up in Maryland. That's another quarter mile thing, and if we do that, we're probably back on the 315. So maybe we can go quicker up there. That race can be really tricky because the air can get, 2 things happen. One, the track there's a lot of imports up there tearing the track up. Sorry, import guys. It's just a fact. And then the other thing is the conditions can get too good. I've raced up there in like negative 1,500 feet mine shaft air and even better. It's just insane. And what happens is that throws everything out in left field so far that it's really hard to get back under control. People start blowing their motors up right and left because they don't know what to do in those conditions. It can really be bad. And the other thing is the track gets cold and hard. I call it Jolly Rancher. Now, Jolly Rancher candy is really sticky, but it's really hard. And that's the way the tracks get. They feel great, but sometimes you just can't get down them. And I've seen it up there where the 315 cars could not get down it, and the 275 cars could go right down it. So that track and that whole deal can be really tricky. But there's talk of helping Garrett up there with that. Maybe we can get some 40s or 30s. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But that's enough for today. If you're here from Cleetus's channel, welcome aboard. We're talking about all kinds of crazy stuff in here. But, yeah, take a look around and see what you like.
Go!